Well, good morning and welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast sponsored by the Draft Professors. Today, we're here with two great draft professors, Devin Jackson, Jack Brentnall. Devin, you are back home from a week in Mobile. So, how was the All Star circuit for you this year?
Yeah, it was busy. I went to Shrine as well and went directly from Shrine to Mobile, and obviously the winter weather kind of affected my travel a little bit, so I ended up getting stuck one night in Dallas, and needed to get to Mobile a few hours before practice started at the Senior Bowl. But all in all, it was a great experience, and I really enjoyed it, and it was really good to see all these guys up close, and getting a chance to pick their brains and see them do their thing and see them out of position a little bit. So it was a really rewarding experience overall, and I really enjoyed the time that I had. It was 9 days away from home, but I'm also glad to be back home and rest up a little bit.
And Jack, what was your overall impression of the All Star circuit this year?
Yeah, it was good. There was a few new players ended up on my radar, which is always what I think these things are always interesting for. There's the guys that you want to see, kind of how they cope against top competition, maybe in new positions. But I think the big thing for me this week is it's just added a load more guys to my long list of players to watch. So yeah, it was a good week.
Okay, and we are here to talk about offensive tackles, not just the offensive tackles that were in the All Star game, but just the offensive tackles in the draft class. And Devin, I'll kick this one to you. When you're looking at the offensive tackles in this draft class, are you happy that your favorite team has an offensive tackle?
Yeah, definitely so. I think this class is an interesting one because I think there's going to be a lot of debate about guys that played tackle in college and if they are going to stay out on the perimeter at the NFL level. I think after you get past maybe the first five, six, maybe even seven offensive tackles in this class, you either are getting one, a developmental guy, or two, a guy that might be moving in the interior. So I think there's a steep drop off after kind of the top end of the class, and even the top end of the class isn't as good as the years past and the years previously. I think you're going to be taking a little bit of a risk, taking a tackle within the first 5-10 picks of the draft, and there are guys like Francis Mawanoa is one of them that a guy that could play guard at the NFL level. Same thing with Spencer Fano and Caden Proctor. So I think there are guys that you know you don't feel as certain about if they're going to play tackle or not, and even the guys that do feel like true tackles, I don't think you're going to value them as early as some years past, and it'll be interesting, kind of that delicate balance of are these guys going to get overdrafted, or are teams going to wait a little bit before taking one?
And Jack, which tackle is sitting at the top of your board right now?
It's Francis Mono from Miami. He's one of those ones where I think there's going to be questions about whether he plays tackle, as Devin said. That's the case with a lot of these guys, whether he plays tackle in the NFL. I think he can. There are, I suppose, some questions about length and maybe foot speed on an island, but I think he's got enough in both departments to stay there. And I think hands are polished, good play strength. So for me, he's not in that tier of guys that, when you think of the guys we've had in recent years, your Penny Sauls, Tristan Wirfs, those kind of guys. He's not in that tier. Not even like for me, like an Armand Membu type guy. But in this draft, you don't have to necessarily be one of those guys to end up going pretty high. So he's my top tackle.
Yeah, and Devin, how does Francis Maui Noah from Miami grade for you? Tackle guard, and do you have him graded, let's say, as high as a Joe Alt, who went, I believe, top 5 a few years ago?
Yeah, he's definitely not as high as Joe Alt. I do have him guarded or graded as a tackle right now, but I think I open up the possibility of him moving to guard just because I think that his run blocking specifically and the power that he has as a run blocker will really mesh just as well as tackle as it would at guard. And as Jack mentioned, the foot speed aspect of things, just the way that he approaches the game, I feel like it's more of the way that he plays, it feels more like an interior offensive lineman, but um, he's also incredibly athletic and incredibly savvy too. I think, you know, he's on par in terms of the way that he plays technicality wise. Some of the previous tackles we've seen go that high, like Joe Ald and players like that. But he obviously doesn't have the same arm length, and just overall athleticism is maybe a Tristan Wirfs. So I think that he's somewhere in the middle of like he's really technically sound. He's a tremendous run blocker, and he rarely gets beat. Even though he may lack some length, he really finds a way to consistently recover and be able to get his hands inside and find ways to push guys around the arc. So I think overall, you feel pretty good about his baseline and his development over the years and becoming a true stud offensive tackle. But he did play right tackle at the college level, and I just wonder if teams, specifically view him. Is he a right tackle? Is he a right guard? I think all of those things you got to take into consideration when doing his evaluation. But I have him graded as a tackle, and I think it'll be an interesting conversation to see where an NFL team ends up deciding with him.
Yeah. And then, Devin, who are the tackles that you have graded after Francis Maui Noah that you could foresee going round one?
Yeah, I think Caleb Lomu, the Utah offensive tackle, is up there. Caden Proctor, Spencer Fano, and Monroe Freeling are the guys to me that I think can get in the first round. Max Ian Chenner, the Arizona State tackle. I think he's kind of in that mix as well. But I think for him, he's more of a day two guy. But I would say those five guys: Malinoa, Proctor, Lomu, Fano, and Freely. Not in that particular order, but I just think those are the guys I think get in the first round.
And Jack, where are you on those five, I guess, six players that Devin just mentioned?
So I'd say I can see all of them definitely going in the first. The one that I'm lower on that I wouldn't have in that kind of range personally is Caden Proctor from Alabama. He's a fair bit lower than the others for me. I have Blake Miller in that mix, the Clemson right tackle, who I think he's one I'm definitely just going to be higher on than consensus. 4-year starter, really high-end athlete. I mean, he's kind of in some ways a bit of a contrast to Maui in that it's like Maui he's really technically refined, but are the physical skills all there? Whereas with Miller, it's the length's great, the size is good, probably the best athlete or in the conversation for the best athlete at tackle in this class. A little technical refinement needed. He's not completely raw by any stretch of the imagination, but I think for me, he's a guy I'd be considering there, kind of in the top 15 to 20 range.
Yeah, and Blake Miller, to me, is an interesting player from the standpoint of we covered him on the channel last year, and the advice was to go back to school. And then we covered him in the summer, but he wasn't getting a lot of love. There were a lot of players everybody liked more than Blake Miller in the summer. And even as we covered, college football, there were always players that people liked more than Blake Miller. But now I'm starting to hear a lot of Blake Miller round one, Blake Miller top 50. Devin, where are you on Blake Miller right now?
Yeah, Blake Miller was always a player that I really liked. Even going into the summer, even coming out of the summer, I think for me he was always in that second, third round range, and I still feel pretty similarly. But again, I think when guys like Trevor Gooseby goes back to school, I think that opens up and more tackles potentially getting some love, especially in the back end of round one. The athleticism is off the charts, and I think, frankly, if you're going to talk about like Monroe Freeling in that first round area, and Max Chandler, in that range too, I feel like it will be unfair not to fit Blake Miller into that because I think he's just as athletic, not if not more than those other two guys. And then I also think, you know, tackles of his skill set, multi-year starter, really good recovery ability, all those things. I think those are things that play early in the NFL and that teams want to value. And when you look at the back end of the first round, there are several teams that are going to be looking for tackle or potentially looking for offensive tackle. So, and just from everything you hear and know, he's going to test really well too. So I think when all those things are in consideration, I think he's a guy that obviously gets that discussion as a back end of the first round guy. And I completely see the vision one and two, the way that people value that as well. So I think it's a little combination of the tackle class has come kind of some openings there, especially late in the first round. I think Blake Miller could be one of those guys that you put in that mix.
I think he's also more of a pure tackle than some of the other guys who are probably in the similar range, right? Like, maybe Caleb Lemu is. I think Caleb Lemu is a tackle, but like Spencer Fano, there's the question of, is he a guard? Is he a tackle? I know it's definitely the case with Proctor. We've already talked about it with Moanoa. So if you're a team who maybe wants offensive line help in general, I could see maybe why somebody might go in a different direction. But if you're sat there saying, right, we want a tackle, it's kind of a similar thing with Monroe Freeling, where it's like, those guys are tackles to me. They are, then there's no, why would you move them inside? So it's like, if you're really after a tackle for sure, then I can see why teams might like him.
And it's interesting that you guys suggest Caden Proctor guard. So when Jerry Ostrowski, retired NFL offensive lineman, covered Proctor on this channel, he said he doesn't see any world where Proctor would play guard. Now, I think the Mekhi Bectons of the world may prove that theory less accurate, but Caden Proctor, is he too large to play guard? How do you see specifically Caden Proctor at the NFL level, Devin?
Yeah, he's a tough evaluation because I think based off of the 2024 tape, you felt pretty good that he's probably going to go top 10. And, he moves at an incredibly excellent pace for a guy that's, 360 plus pounds and 6'7". It's an interesting dynamic. I still think he's going to end up playing tackle at the NFL level, just because I think the high level flashes that you see throughout the last 2 years are there, but also you see some at times the foot quickness, specifically in pass pro come up. You see a guy that sometimes falls off his blocks, and a player that has all the athletic skill set, but you wonder if the 360 plus pounds, if that's going to be playable at offensive tackle versus offensive guard. So I think those things give you pause, but to me, I think he's a tackle. I think if he plays in that 350 to 355 range, you feel a little bit better about him playing out on the perimeter. And he was like at the Shrine Bowl, and you get a close look, and he was just observing, but you get a close look up at just who he is and what he looks like. I mean, he carries his weight well. So I think about all those things and think that he just needs I think just better overall coaching, and I think that a lot of the things that he struggles with are fixable things, and I would just will be surprised if one, he made it out of the first round, and two, a team didn't give him a chance to play offensive tackle at the NFL level. But I think there's some credence in him moving into the interior. I just think for me, he's offensive tackle And I think he'll get a chance to prove that at the NFL level.
Jack, anything that you have to add on Caden Proctor, tackle or guard?
Yeah, I mean, I think my view is unless like guys are either really lacking in terms of arm length, my view is always let them fail at tackle and then try them at guard rather than just assume they can't play tackle. Because if they do hit, then it's worth it. I think for me, my issue with Proctor is I think that and this is where the tackle guard conversation is tricky, right? Because I don't think he's got I think he's explosive in terms of that initial kick step. I think is good, especially for his size. I think it's really good. You can see that in pass protection. Where he just loses me is, I think it's the ability to redirect and play on an island in pass protection. I just don't think that's there. But then equally, if you move into guard, he's tall and he really struggles with his pad level. And so then you just think, well, hang on, if you're going to stick him on the interior, and these guys are going to be better leveraged, smaller, stocky guys, they'll get under his pads. So it's a tricky one because I think the two things that concern me about his game most, one is prohibitive at tackle and one is prohibitive at guard. So yeah, he's an interesting one. He feels to me quite scheme specific. They're different kind of players, but it's a bit like the Orlando Brown thing where it's like you can get him to play tackle in a certain scheme, but if you're going to just ask him to be on an island blindside protector routinely, I just think you're going to be in trouble.
Okay, and then there's two tackles where I think consensus has them lower than specifically like when Owen and Jerry covered offensive linemen for Draft Professor. Owen and Jerry both loved Austin Barber and Caleb Tiernan. But like I'm even looking at Sam Teets posted an offensive tackle list yesterday, and he has Austin Barber and Caleb Tiernan. I'm going to say where I see nearly everybody else has them, and that's some type of like late day 2 or early day 3 tier. Devin, where are you on Austin Barber and Caleb Tiernan right now?
Yeah, Austin Barber is a tough one because I think he's extremely athletic, and the flashes that I saw coming into the year were very encouraging. But the 2025 tape and even the Senior Bowl tape, he really struggled. Just being able to handle speed off the edge, being able to redirect, being able to refit his hands, even some power gave him some issues. So I think Barber right now is probably on that fringe day 2, early day 3. I think he probably ends up going day 3. I just don't think I see a starter right now at the NFL level in Barber. I think he's a developmental player that it's going to take some time to fix a little bit of his technique, fix a little bit of his his issues. And then Tiernan, I'm not sure that he plays tackle at the NFL level. I think he's going to be one of those guys that come in with sub 33-inch arms, and that lack of length kind of shows up at times in pass protection. I think he's really technically refined. I think he's an average athlete, a decent player as a run blocker, but again, I'm not sure that I see a potential NFL starter at tackle, and I feel like teams might be looking at him maybe to move in the interior and not to necessarily scout the helmet. But I kind of see some of the issues that Peter Skoronski had coming out, except that Peter Skoronski was an exceptional athlete. I think Tiernan, is going to be one of those guys, one of those arm length guys that, probably ends up moving the interior at the NFL level.
And Jack, where are you on Austin Barber and Caleb Tiernan right now?
Yeah, Barber, I'm lower on. He's day 3 for me. I think there's some value there in that he's got experience starting at both tackle spots. I think Devin mentioned the athleticism. I think that's really good. You see some really nice flashes, like he had a nice snatch trap. You can see him handle stunts and blitzes pretty well. But like for me, I just don't see great strength and displacement ability in the run game. And I think his anchor is just a little bit too leaky. So I just struggle with guys like that who are too much of a finesse type for me. Tiernan, I still need to kind of go back over some more of his 2025 tape, but even over summer, I thought he was a guard. I think the arm length is the limiter there. He is tall for a guard, so again, it's another one of those things where that's maybe a slight concern. But sub 33-inch arms, it's just going to be difficult to get the job done as a tackle in the NFL. But again, he started at both left and right tackle. I think he's good in pass protection, really good eyes, which I think if I'm looking at guys in terms of their transition from tackle to guard, a lot of it comes down to things like that. The ability to things move much quicker when you're on the interior. So if you can kind of read things quickly, you've got good eyes against stunts, blitzes, that sort of thing. I think that's important. So Tiernan, I like on day 2, but I think he's a guard.
Okay. And I think we've covered nearly every possible day 1 or day 2 tackle with the exception of maybe Jude Bowery. So Jack, I'll pivot this one to you. Where do you want to go with the tackle discussion? Are there players that you want to talk with Devin about, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably just pick one of the guys I really like. So I mean, I think I'm going to be higher on than the consensus. I only got to his tape recently, but Boise State's tackle Cage Casey is a guy who I really like. Again, he's another one. I mean, this is a theme of this tackle class, isn't it? Where there's going to be talk about whether he moves inside or not. He is not necessarily the biggest. The arm length is passable. I think he is. I want to say it's just over 33-inch arms, so it's passable, but it's not kind of a strength. But I think for me, like, his hands are some of the most clean and accurate in the class. I think he's got a good firm punch. You see him displace guys in the run game. His anchor as a pass protector is good, and he is really smart and experienced. I mean, he's had, I think, over 40 consecutive starts at Boise State. When you watch his tape against better teams as well, it's not just that he was playing at the Group of 5 level and beating those guys. He did have good tape against better competition. Now, is he the best athlete in the world? No. Is he the biggest and the longest tackle? No. But I think he's just one of those where he's so well refined, and I think the tape is so clean. He's a guy I'd love him in Green Bay because he feels like the kind of guy who could just play wherever you need the help. I think he could work on the interior. I think he can play left tackle potentially, can play right tackle. So he's a guy I'm definitely going to be a fair bit higher on than consensus. I think I've got him marginally above Proctor, which I think is, I think that's maybe more than I'm lower on Proctor than most. But I've got both in the kind of 3rd round range.
So Devin, where are you on Cage Casey right now?
Yeah, he's a day 2 guy for me. I think in that 3rd round range probably makes the most sense to me. I have similar thoughts as Jack. I think he's a really good player. I think he, always finding work in the run game, solid pass protection. And I think for the most part, he held his own, this past week in Mobile. I didn't feel like he felt too out of place. I don't feel like he felt like a guy that, necessarily needed to move to guard at the NFL level. I certainly think it's a possibility, but, as opposed to some other guys we just mentioned, I feel a little bit better about him, especially the week that he had in Mobile, about him potentially playing tackle at the NFL level versus playing guard. So I think Casey is a really good player, and I think I feel good about him staying out at tackle, and I think he's going to be valued in 3rd round and maybe early 4th round range.
Okay. So Devin, I know that you've got a drop here in a couple of minutes. Do you want to let everybody know kind of where your draft content resides if they want to look for any of your other evaluations?
Yeah, you can follow me on X or Twitter or wherever you call it at reald_Jackson. A lot of my work is on theinquirer.com, and I post a lot of clips and post a lot of highlights and all those different things, especially on Twitter. So so we can find most of my work.
Cool. So when we look at the offensive tackle class, I guess we covered it pretty well at the intro. There's probably some day 3 players where the measurements are there, but maybe the film hasn't caught up to the measurements, like the Demetrius Crownovers, the Drew Sheltons of the world. So, Devin, you want to give a shout out to any day 3 guys that, like, if you need that developmental tackle on the roster, there may be some day 3 guys to look at that we haven't mentioned yet.
Yeah, when I was talking to Jack, one name that I brought up was Emil Wagner, the Notre Dame offensive tackle. And I don't think his tape is particularly great when you watch Notre Dame, and you can clearly see some of the issues he has with ducking his head and, you know, falling off blocks, all those different things. But he took a step when he was at the Shrine Bowl. I was a little bit surprised about the way they perform at the Shrine Bowl and how he looked at practice. I think for me, you feel a little bit better about his skill set and the way that he approaches the athleticism and getting to talk to him. He's very fully aware of the things he needs to focus on and get better. But I mean, he was a team captain. He was, one of those guys that, really good character, really good player off the field. So I think he's a guy to me that I would be worth wanting to develop. He played right tackle at Notre Dame. But I think he's a guy that could play either side. He certainly has the athleticism to do so. The arm length is there. The flashes on tape are there, but they just aren't as apparent. But if I'm willing to bet on a day 3 guy, I really like Emil Wagner, and then Cronover as well, Demetrius Cronover. He's a guy that made me want to go back to the tape and watch him a little bit closely. After the week he had in Mobile, he was the best one-on-one offensive tackle or best pass pro one-on-one offensive tackle. At the Senior Bowl, he probably won the most reps, was the most consistent every day, and you just wonder, where was that on the tape? And I know Texas A&M does some weird things where they move guys around a lot on the offensive line, like Trey Zune. He was there day 1. He would obviously play a lot of interior at the Senior Bowl, but he was a left tackle, obviously for Texas A&M. But yeah, Cronover is a guy I want to go back to the tape, and so is Wagner. But I think those 2 guys right now are probably at the top of the list of developmental players for me.
Cool. Jack, how about you? Any day 3 offensive tackles where they meet maybe the measurements, but the film isn't quite there? And Devin, I know that you're going to have to drop here shortly, so thank you very much for popping in here this fine Sunday morning. So
yeah, you guys have a great one.
Yep. Thanks, Devin.
Good, Devin. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the most obvious example of this is Miami offensive tackle Markel Bell. So he obviously played opposite. Francis Mourinho played left tackle for Miami. I mean, he's 6'9", 358 pounds. I mean, I can't remember what his arm length measured in at the Senior Bowl, but it was something like 36 inches. I mean, this is a guy who, he's almost bigger than Caden Proctor, which is saying something, right? So, I mean, he's huge. I liked his tape more than I thought I would. He caught my eye at the Senior Bowl, had a couple of nice reps. There was that one where he lost. I think it was Derek Moore, went straight through his chest. But I was intrigued enough by the rest of what I saw that I went back and watched some more of his tape. And to be honest, I thought he was surprisingly solid. I thought I'd be seeing a toolsy guy with nothing more than, the physical side of the game. But I think his hand usage really stood out to me. I think he's got refined hands. He's got a firm punch, as you'd expect for a guy who's, 360 pounds. Now, he's one where, like, the height is going to just put some teams off, right? Like, he is a major waist bender. He will lean into his blocks. You see it in the run game as well. Like, you would think a guy who is 360 pound is going to be an absolute mauler in the run game. But you watch the tape and, like, he frequently struggles to kind of get that vertical push on what kind of gap scheme runs because he's so tall. He's got a really nice ability to kind of talk guys out of the gaps when he's, doing a front side kick out. But in terms of that driving, he just isn't quite there. And the foot speed is always going to be a little limited in terms of that ability to redirect and mirror on an island. But if you're a team that runs, lots of duo, lots of inside zone, and maybe doesn't want to put your tackles on an island, if you're going to play multi-tight end sets, I think he could be a really interesting player. So he's one that I like. I think also JC Davis, the tackle from Illinois, he was another one who caught my eye at the Senior Bowl, partly because he was playing a fair bit of guard in Mobile, and I thought he looked really good. There was a number of reps where he was just able to absorb power and kind of anchor and hold the pocket. I think that's the name of the game with him. I mean, he's got, a good thick frame. He's like 335 pounds, good length. So I think he can stick at tackle. His anchor is just phenomenal. You watch in the Ohio State game, there are multiple times where he's just completely stonewalling Kenyatta Jackson and Arvell Reese. His hands are really powerful and he's super experienced. So he's had, I think, 49 consecutive starts. So again, another physical, powerful, experienced guy who I think has the ability to play inside and out. Now, again, like we've said with a few of these guys, he's not got the most explosive kick step. So I think he can stick at tackle, but he is going to struggle if you ask him to properly set vertically against a kind of wide 9 speed rusher. I think the hands are strong. The issue is more the placement. You see that in pass pro where he tends to land a bit wide, but it's also obvious at the second level when climbing, kind of in the run game. He'll kind of get over his toes, lean, and not have his hands inside the frame consistently. But a lot of that's coachable. So I think in the right scheme, I think he could be an interesting player with potential. Like I say, the ability to play inside and out. When you get into day 3, for me, I think that is something that teams are going to look at because you're not drafting a guy on day 3 to be a starter. And so I think like having those guys that can line up at guard or tackle is really important because if one of your starters goes down injured, having that guy who you're not going, right, okay, he's a right guard only, and he's my backup. I mean, that's not going to fly in the NFL. So a guy like JC Davis, I think, is one that could have a long career in the NFL, even if he's not necessarily going to be a 17-game starter every season.
Yeah, and just out of curiosity, how high is Davis for you? Like Owen really liked Davis when we covered him for scouting reports. But
I have him.
Owen was so much higher on Davis than I think I've heard everybody else.
Interesting. I like him. I think he is tackle 10 for me. Kind of probably that 4th to 5th round.
Okay, range. You guys see him the same. Yeah, like because Owen was like very late day 2, or take him at the top of day 3. And you're at round 4 or 5. So
I think, and the Senior Bowl stuff really impressed me because I think that's part of the thing. When you see these guys play tackle and you're looking at them on tape and going, okay, can they hang there? But they've not played guard. Then you're always thinking, okay, well, I'm now projecting a potential kick inside off no tape, right? Like we said with Proctor and with Fano and people like that. It's like, okay, you're just kind of now thinking, I hope they can play there if they can't play tackle. Whereas I've seen enough there with Davis in those one-on-one reps that made me think, yeah, okay. And I know people might think, well, okay, you're not getting loads and loads of in-game reps there, but those one-on-one drills are not designed for the offensive lineman to succeed. So if you can come out of them looking good, then I think that's a real plus.
Okay. So I want to flip the tackle conversation to the draft order and start like talking through teams that we know need a tackle, and is their draft position too high, or which players do you like in that range? The first team I want to bring up is the New York Football Giants at 5. I think the Giants need offensive line help times 2 or 3. Like if the Giants drafted 3 offensive linemen, I don't think any of the 3 would be a wasted pick.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you have graded high enough for the Giants to suggest taking at 5 from an offensive line perspective?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Where this is one of those where it's the state of the class rather than necessarily the talent of these guys. I think in this class, Mawinoa, I think at 5, it's probably still a little rich. I mean, he won't be a top 5 player on my big board. He wasn't a top 5 player on my big board when I released it last week, but he's. I wouldn't feel bad about it. Like with him, I don't think we said earlier. I don't think you're getting a Penny Sewell or a Tristan Wirfs. But you're getting a guy who is I think, a long-term NFL starter, plus starter. You don't find plus starters at offensive tackle on the open market. And I think that kind of helps factor into where you take these guys. So is he a top 5 player in the class for me? No. But you don't get these guys in free agency, or you very, very rarely do. So I'd almost be more comfortable spending. It's like quarterback, right? You'd probably be comfortable taking the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th best quarterback, number 1 overall, potentially, because those guys don't really generally hit the market. And I think it's a similar kind of thing with offensive tackle.
You see, and that's actually a really good point. So in my opinion, the positions that you have to draft, because you're never going to find them on the open market: quarterback number 1, offensive tackle number 2, and its defensive tackle is number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, those players at those positions very rarely hit the free agent market if they're effective at what they do. So you have to grow your own talent, meaning that you have to draft it, develop it, and then extend it and re-sign it.
And I think the lifespan of the career is also important to that as well, right? Like, I think it's certainly true with offensive tackle and quarterback in that conversation. If you hit one of these guys, they can play well into their 30s. This is not a guy who you're going to get, the first contract and maybe 3-4 more years out of after that. If you get a guy and he comes into the league at 22, he could conceivably play into. I mean, I don't know what Trent Williams is now, but we're seeing guys play well into their 30s, and it's not uncommon.
Right, and to your point about like Trent Williams specifically, I think Trent Williams at this point is on team 3 or team 4, right?
Yeah.
Right, because I think he went from the Chiefs to the Bengals. I think he's on the Bengals now, isn't he?
No, he was Washington.
Thank you. I'm thinking of a different player that went from the Chiefs to the Bengals.
Yeah, that Orlando Brown went.
Thank you.
Chiefs, Bengals. No, yes, I think he went Chiefs, Bengals. He also was at Ravens. But Williams was at the Redskins for like 10 years. And then, I mean, he's been with the 49ers now for, I don't know, must be going on 5 or 6 years.
And that was my point about what you get in free agency at offensive tackle is somebody that other teams have discarded, right?
Yeah.
At this point, all the players that we've mentioned, they've had really good NFL careers, and they're just hanging on for one more year.
Yeah, and you look at like a player like Williams. The only reason he hit the open market was because of medical issues, and then kind of falling out with the team. It's not often that a team is just going to voluntarily say, actually, we can find another offensive tackle elsewhere. I think it's a smart thing to be drafting highly, especially if you've got a young quarterback or you're trying to find a quarterback. For a team like the Giants, there's going to be questions about whether Jackson Dart is that guy long term, but you're not going to find out unless you give him good protection up front.
Yep. So then the next team in the draft where I'm looking at that may need an offensive tackle is the Cleveland Browns at 6.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to me, it's been well known. Like, I thought the Browns should have, instead of drafting a linebacker last year, drafted a tackle. Right. So the Browns, they're in this situation. It's my opinion, it's their own fault. They've had plenty of draft capital.
Mm-hmm.
and they're choosing to not address the tackle position, but they are drafting at 6. They have another pick that's a little bit later in the draft order. I believe it's 16.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you have in the range as an offensive tackle to pick at 6? And who do you have in the range to pick at 16?
Again, I think it's only Marinello really at 6 that I'd probably be comfortable with. I personally would be comfortable with Blake Miller anywhere from kind of 12 down, which, like I say, I know is higher than the consensus, but I think that the positional value element bumps it up. I could entertain the Utah guys kind of mid to back end of the first. I was definitely a lot higher on Farno over the summer, but I just didn't see the growth in 2025 that I wanted. But I'd say those two guys again. If you're a really tackle needy team, middle of the first round, I think I could see it.
Okay.
I think they're 19th and 20th on my big board, or 20th and 21st.
Okay, so then the next team I'm looking at for offensive tackle, I'm going to call out the Dolphins at 11, the Lions at 17, and the Panthers at 19. Now, there's no guarantee that any of those teams, like tackle, isn't going to be as high of a priority specifically for Miami or Carolina necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're looking at your board and how you've graded the tackles, at pick 11, pick 17, pick 19, which tackles are in the discussion there for you?
I think for Miami, I'd like I say Blake Miller would probably be. That's kind of right around where I'd start considering him. I don't think he'll be gone by then. I don't think he'll be taken in the kind of top 15, 20 picks based on kind of what we're hearing at the moment. But that's where I'd start considering him. And then those two Utah guys, I think, are in that the range for the likes of the Lions and for the Panthers. The next guy on my list is Monroe Freeling from Georgia, but I mean he's more like the 25 onwards type of pick. I like him. I think he's just a guy I feel like I'd need more development from. So much more the back end of the first. I think if we were talking him as a 15 to 20 pick, it's probably just a little bit too rich for me.
Okay. And then you hit the next tier. So at pick 23 is the Eagles. At pick 27 is the 49ers. Both teams need a tackle in 2027.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I know that there's been some Philadelphia Eagles mocks done on this channel by Eagles people where they are taking Proctor at 23. They're taking Isaiah World at 23. So they're interested in tackle for the Eagles at 23. Mm-hmm. And then again, 49ers, I believe, have a 40-year-old tackle. So they'll be in the tackle market. Do you see, like, if either of the Utah tackles are there for the 49ers, do you see them passing on a Utah tackle?
I don't think so. I think those guys both fit that kind of offense that Shanahan wants to run in terms of having offensive linemen. It's not just a pure wide zone scheme anymore, but you still need guys who can get out in space and play in space. And I think that's where those two guys are the best. So I think if they're on the board, I can't see either of them getting past San Francisco. I'd be intrigued to see what the Eagles do, because I think if they do go offensive tackle, they're a team that, I mean, I never want to write off the Eagles' ability to develop offensive tackles. So I think Monroe Freeling, I think it'd be great there, because I think they have probably the best offensive line coach in the NFL. And I think Freeling's issues are more technical than physical. So I think he could be coached up and turn into a good tackle. Proctor, first round is always just going to be too rich for my blood for me. I think he's one of those players for me where he's, obviously massive, former 5-star, plays at Alabama. That kind of pedigree gets matters a lot, and it does carry over. But again, anybody that gets drafted by the Eagles to play offensive line, I'm kind of like, yeah, you know what? I'll. It's in the same way that with the Packers, when the Packers pick an offensive lineman on day 3, even if I don't like them, there's always that element of like, okay, like this team is just good at picking these guys and turning them into something more than they are. So you're willing to give them a bit of the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I'm always fascinated by the day 3 picks that the Bills make on offensive line, right? Like Tylen Grable. There was a draft professor who we were doing some draft exercises, and he was pounding the table for Grable as left tackle in like the 20th round of a drafted team. And then Buffalo goes and drafts Grable. And when he was pounding the table for him, and like at that point, we were in UDFA range kind of thing, right? And to your point, once your team has offensive tackles, you just keep drafting them.
Yeah.
You just do it on day 3, but you keep drafting them because if you have them, it's a commodity that is tough to find.
And it's that ability to have the guys who can step in when you need it. Like the Packers, they've had years where they had like Josh Nijman, who, when he was with the Packers, was a really solid swing tackle that could kind of come in and play when Bakhtiari was injured. That is the kind of injury that can derail a team really quickly, because if you lose your starting tackle and you don't have a viable replacement, like that's how you short circuit an offense, because your run game struggles. You can't pass the ball anywhere near as well. Like it is a complete offensive line. I always think of it like offensive line is kind of like cornerback in that it's a weak link position. It doesn't matter if you've got 3, or in the case of corners, 3 other ones, or in this case also offensive line 4 others that are good. If you have that one weak link, the other team is just going to pick at it and pick at it and pick at it. And you can stop it, but you have to devote loads of extra resources to do it, and that will impact your ability to do stuff elsewhere. So I think, taking a flyer on these guys in day 3, like, you know, for me, like a guy like Isaiah World, like I was much higher on him over summer. I was underwhelmed by the tape at Oregon, but the tools are crazy that I'm just like, you know what? Take him on day 3, because if you can coach him to a point where that technique is tidied slightly and you've managed to turn a day 3 pick into a solid backup, potentially a spot starter, that's so valuable. That is so valuable, and so much more valuable than other positions where you're maybe getting a special teams contributor, you know.
Correct. And sometimes with offensive linemen, they just need to get into an NFL strength and conditioning program. And I say it all the time. The number one measure of a draft class is the jump they make from year 1 to year 2. So meaning if your team drafted an offensive lineman last year, it's their performance in training camp this year that's more important than what they did as a rookie, because like it should be pointed out, like, you know, obviously this is a draft podcast. Every player that we're talking about right now is not prepping for the NFL season. They're prepping for the draft. Bill Belichick has said that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, you know, they're focused on making sure they have a good combine, good pro day. Whereas anybody that's on an NFL roster is getting in shape for next year.
Yeah.
And they're already working on it. We don't see it. The cameras aren't on, but they're working hard right now. So, any other offensive linemen that you would like to discuss before we close out the podcast?
I suppose we've not talked much. Devin did mention him briefly, but we've not talked much about Arizona State's Maxi Iheanacho. He's an interesting one because I think he's one where like opinion is all over the place on him. I have seen loads of tweets over the last week, certainly since he was at the Senior Bowl, kind of talking him up as a first-round pick. And whilst I'm not near that myself, I understand why there's a lot of buzz around him. So, I mean, he didn't start playing football until, I mean, it's a number of years ago. It's not that long. I want to say it's like 3 or 4 years ago he started. He's I think he played soccer mostly in high school, which is interesting for a guy who's 6'6" and over 300 pounds. Like, I don't know what position he played. I'd love to know. But he has an ideal frame with good arm length. He is one of the smoothest tackles in space that I've seen in this class. His ability to mirror in pass protection is excellent. If you want to see the guy who did the best job at stopping those Texas Tech edge rushers of David Bailey and Romello Height, he's probably the closest, right? Don't get me wrong, they both had their moments, but he was pretty solid against Texas Tech, and there's not many other tackles that can say that. That explosiveness will play at the NFL level, and I think his ability to operate with quick and tidy feet, whether that's as a pass protector, whether that is as a run blocker who's climbing and locating at the second level, I think that's really important. Now, he's still raw for me, and like this is why for me, I don't think he's in that first round conversation. I don't see much displacement ability despite some decent strength. I think his outside hand is pretty soft, and it can nullify his quickness. He gets to his landmark, but he doesn't have that outside hand to properly jolt and stop an outside rush. And then the placement is often quite wide as well, which I think hinders the ability to sustain. His ankle will get tested. There were times at the Senior Bowl where you did see that, where I think Gabe Backus, the edge from Illinois, went through his chest. I think partly, and it was definitely the case in that one, it's because his hands are late. Now, that's coachable. And again, a lot of this is the stuff that you think, okay, well, I was just saying, get him in an NFL weight room, get him, with the right coaching staff. And I think he has real potential. Like I say, I'm not as high on others. Like, he's not in that first round conversation for me. He's probably more in that, probably early day 3 for me, to be honest. But I think he's a fascinating one. I think if you're looking for that developmental guy that you think, let's just get the tools and let's see if we can coach him up, because I think the upside's tremendous, he's probably my pick.
Okay. And why don't you let everybody know about the touchdown, all of the other draft work that you do, and where they can find your content?
Sure. So, most of my stuff is either on Twitter, handle is Jack_Brentnall, or over at the touchdown. So, head up all the NFL draft content there. So, I've been posting a bunch of Senior Bowl clips over the last week. I might try and get a few more of the one-on-ones out over the rest of this weekend and early next week, because I think those are always interesting. There'll be loads of draft content coming over the touchdown over the next few weeks, and I am slowly but surely pulling together the this year's draft guide. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Cool. So greatly appreciative to have you involved with Draft Professors. Early Sunday morning for us, mid-afternoon for you. Timing works out pretty well. I want to say to everybody watching, Draft Professor, we're podcasting generally twice a day. Today's unique. Today, Draft Professor is pretty much podcasting from now all the way up until like 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing mock drafts. We're going to have a whole bunch of guests on today. Obviously, there's no football, so I am working to fill that void. So you will see mock drafts from about 6 different teams with just a different guest coming on for the rest of the day. And then 7 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern every weeknight. And then we do group mock drafts every Friday. So every Friday, Draft Professor does a mock where 32 people pick for 32 teams. And those are usually the most watched podcasts of the week. If you want to draft for your team, go to the Draft Professor Twitter page at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. And the pinned post is how you can sign up to draft for your team. So just drop in a reply for what team you want to draft for, and I usually sort that out either on Thursday night or Friday afternoon as my schedule allows. So for the 110 podcasters at the Draft Professor, for Devin Jackson, Jack Brentnall, and myself, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy your Sunday, and we will see you on a podcast again in about 30 minutes. Thank you, everybody.